Today we are delighted to have Dr. Sanjiv Chopra. He is a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. He has written more than half a dozen books, and today we are going to talk to him about happiness. And joining him is Adrian Wilkins. He is personal and business coach, also a motivational speaker, and he has also written books and organizes workshops and seminars on happiness and leadership. So, Dr. Chopra, welcome to our studio.
Thank you very much, Upendra.
Thank you for coming early. This is one of the coldest days in 11 years.
Yeah.
So, Adrian,
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for coming. And
Thank you.
so we are going to talk about happiness.
Right.
Before we get into the details, let us start what you think. There are so many definitions of happiness. For some, it is success in business, some in personal life, some in family success. What is the most common denominator of happiness, what you have come across?
I think success is important in life. It's important to have goals in life and then to have an action plan and achieve those goals. But success is not the key to happiness. Albert Schweitzer, who was a Nobel laureate, physician, humanitarian, theologian, once said, success is not the key to happiness. Happiness is the key to success.
Excellent.
So happiness is a mindset. Happiness is a way of life. Happiness is more than the sum total of happy moments. Most of the time when I talk to people about happiness, they're thinking of happy moments. You know, I got a new car. I got married to this amazing lady. My firstborn child was born. I got an award. And those are happy moments, but that's not happiness.
Adrian, what do you think? What is your take?
I think happiness is simple and difficult, or can be difficult. If I had to describe happiness, I would say the simplest way would be to say that happiness is the ability to be with what is. And I think that's so...
Which means that what you have or what is in front of you?
Whatever's in front of you. Because what we find is that circumstances have much less to do with happiness than actual happiness. Happiness is something that comes from within us. So the ability to be with what is, whether that is a joyful moment or a difficult moment, we're always at choice. And I think taking personal responsibility for your own experience, which again is probably the basis of so many religions and spiritual beliefs. However, as I said earlier, that's one thing to understand that. It's another thing to live that way.
So now you said something very interesting, that happiness is a choice. Can you elaborate on that? How happiness is a choice? If happiness is a choice, everybody should be happy.
Sure. So I'll give you an example. I read this in a book a long time ago. It was something that Tony Robbins had written. Mm-hmm. And he had gone to Hawaii to watch a solar eclipse. And he got to Hawaii, and he was sitting out there, and right at the moment that the solar eclipse was supposed to come, and tens of thousands of people had come to the island to see this, right at the moment of the eclipse, the clouds came by. Mm-hmm. And right? Think about this,
sure.
Right? You've
and
invested all this.
the eclipse.
Eclipse the eclipse, right?
Absolutely.
So what he did is he stopped and noticed what was happening. Some people were devastated. They had absolutely, oh my God, I spent all this money, I came all this way, and I didn't get to see my eclipse. Some people laughed and went off and partied. Other people said, okay, so what? So the experience was the same for all of those people, or the circumstance was the same for all of those people. And some people decided to have fun with it, and some people decided to be devastated by it. So did they do that consciously as a choice? That's a good question. I'm sure it's not that conscious. In fact, I know it's not that conscious for most of us. But I think happy people have a tendency to be with what is, and find the joy in it, and find the learning in it, find the growth in it. Even when we don't like a particular experience, we almost always learn something from it.
Sure.
So that, I think, is the big difference between
So,
people.
Dr. Chopra, if happiness is what Adrian said, so there must be something opposite of happiness. And what is that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
You know, Pendra, I don't know what it is. No, I'm being facetious.
No.
I'm being facetious. I happen to be born very happy. I spend a lot of time with friends like Adrian, who are always positive, upbeat, inspirational. Jim Rohn, a best-selling author, once said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So the opposite of happiness, of course, would be despair, sadness. And in order to really appreciate happiness, we all have to have experienced some suffering. You cannot experience the light without knowing what is darkness.
Sure.
And the same way, I think in order to experience happiness, we have to have experienced sadness. But we don't let those sad moments affect us. We don't dwell on those. Happy people tend to get over it much faster. They actually have a stronger immune system. There's so many benefits of being happy. They're more creative, they have better social interactions, and they don't dwell on things that are in the past. You know, there's a wonderful saying, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift.
Sure.
That's why it's called the present.
So,
I think that's what Adrian was saying beautifully, that happy people are in the moment, they're in the present, they're content.
now, you said that we are average of 5 people we know.
Right.
How long you have known Adrian?
Not long enough. But I think I've known Adrian for about 5 years.
About 5 years.
But in those 5 years, we have spent a lot of time together. We
Yeah.
meet almost twice a week, and we have coffee, and we shoot the breeze, and we talk about ideas. We socialize, we go out together for dinners, etc.
The first time I met both of you together was the workshop you did last year
Right.
at Doubletree
Right.
in Waltham on happiness, and I
Right.
think we spent almost a day there, and that was a wonderful experience.
Thank you.
How did you both of you come up with that type of a workshop and concept?
So I've been giving a talk, and it's resonating for people, and I'm giving it around the country. And it's entitled Dharma, Happiness, and Living with Purpose. And then with a colleague and friend of mine, I'm writing a book on happiness. So I mentioned it to Adrian, and Adrian said, what a great idea. People will love to hear about and learn about happiness. But while you're working on the book, why don't you and I do a workshop on happiness?
He's giving me credit, but I'm going to be honest with you, it was his idea.
Okay.
And he has so many of these ideas. I believe that's part of his happiness, is always looking to say, what can I do now? What's possible now? How can I fulfill my purpose? And we'll talk about that some. Also, how critical purpose is to being happy. But it was actually Sanjiv that said, you know, we really need to do this. And he said, you know, this will be fun. We'll enjoy it. They'll enjoy it. And it was a great experience. And I'm really looking forward. We're going to actually do it again on May 9th. And we're both very excited.
And before that, of course, we are having both of you coming to our health expo
Right.
on April
Correct.
19th, and we're
Yeah.
really looking forward to,
Absolutely.
to seeing that. And we expect a great crowd there. And,
Yeah,
people
terrific. We're honored to be there.
Excellent.
We're going to talk about happiness, living with purpose, and then we're going to have some interactive exercises for the people in the workshop.
Excellent. I did one more question for you. Of course, you know, where we grew up, and heart plays a very important role in our thinking. And I know Dr. Chopra was born and grew up in,
Right.
in India,
Sure.
and he has some, of course, the Eastern philosophy in his back of his mind. And then you have Italian background, right?
Right.
So how have you ever looked at happiness from these two different backgrounds?
Yeah, you know, I haven't actually looked at it that way, but however, it's impossible not to spend as much time with somebody with a different background without asking those questions and wondering what life was like. And the more that Sanjiv has talked about his life, it actually sounds very similar to my life. I kind of laugh about it because he'll talk about how all the food that was cooked, and I'm laughing. I've said, I'm Italian. What do you
Okay.
mean?
Sure.
You know, were you kidding?
Uh-huh.
Right? I think ultimately there really is very little difference. I think that we're so similar in so many ways and so different in others, and that's the beauty of it. You know, Sanjiv tells a story, and if you want to tell it, or not a story, but a truth, I guess, or studies that have been done about people, for example, who have become paraplegics. And if you measure their happiness before that moment, it drops dramatically, of course, right,
Sure.
with such a terrible thing happening. But the interesting thing is about a year later, they're back at the same level of happiness that they were before the event.
So what is the reason? What happens? Like,
So, you know, human beings are amazingly resilient. And there's this phenomenon of adaptation. And it works both ways. So if somebody wins the lottery and wins $10 million, they're very happy for a short period of
Right.
time. And then they're back to their baseline. In fact, a year later, many of them are unhappier than they were a year ago. All their friends and relatives have come out of the woodwork and say, pay my mortgage, you don't deserve to win the lottery. Some of them have wasted away the money. So this phenomenon is called hedonic adaptation. You adapt to hedonism, but you also adapt to suffering. And it's a fascinating human phenomenon.
Now, Adrian, is happiness a state where we can be all the time in the same state? Or
I don't think we're in the same state, but the way we choose to experience it or the way we do experience it. When Sanjiv was just talking, I was thinking about a concrete example that you or your viewers can think about. Most people have had the experience, not everybody of course, but most people have had the experience of buying a new car. And they buy that car and they get excited about it and they go to the dealer and they think about it and they pick out the color and they're all set and they get home and they go for that drive in that new car. And their happiness does this. But where is it a week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later? Probably in a pretty close place to the car that they gave up, right? So can you be happy during all of those states? Of course. But is it the circumstance or the thing that happened that actually creates the happiness, or how we interact with that experience?
Sanjiv, about you are a doctor and of course, you know, at Harvard Medical School. And so what is the relationship between a good health and happiness?
So good health is important in one being happy because one can do a lot of things that create happiness. So meaningful experiences surpass material objects, just what Adrian was talking about. You get a new car, you buy a brand new home, you get a promotion at work, and your salary goes up 10-20%. You're happy for a short period of time, but meaningful experiences surpass all of that. So if I asked you, Upendra, think of the last vacation you had, and where were you, and did you have a good time? As you're thinking about it, you'll start to smile. So even the expectation, I'm going to be going on a golf pilgrimage, annual pilgrimage that I do with friends of mine to Dominican Republic in a week. Just the expectation of that is making me happy. Then while I'm there, I'm going to be happy. And then when I come back, and Adrian will say to me, Sanjiv, how was DR? I'll be smiling as I'm talking about it.
Sure.
So in order to experience some of those, you need good health. But, you know, Christopher Reeves, who used to be Superman, became paraplegic, and he said, 6 months after the accident, I found joy for the first time in life. He was able to appreciate the sunset, the sunrise, the birds chirping, his friends coming, spending time with him, reading poetry, reading a book. It's again back to that adaptation and resilience that we as human beings are privileged to possess. We need to harness it.
And what is the impact of happiness on health?
So clearly, happy people are healthier. There's actually one very interesting study where they locked people up in a hotel for 7 days, and then they exposed them to the rhinovirus, which causes common cold. And before they did that, they gauged the happiness level of the people. And the people who were happy were less likely to get afflicted with the common cold. And if they got it, they were more likely to recover faster.
Now, do you think you're a happy man?
I am hopelessly happy.
Okay.
People sometimes accuse me that you're faking it. And I'm sorry, but I'm really happy.
So when this your journey on happiness started?
It started in childhood. But you know, the research shows that there is a formula for happiness. And there's like a set point.
This is what everybody wants to know. What is that formula
Right.
for happiness?
So the formula is that happiness is equal to set point. And the set point is like the thermostat in this room. So you may have started off at a happier level than I did, and that accounts for 50% of your happiness. But even that can be modulated by exercise, by meditation, by behavioral cognitive therapy, by expressing gratitude, just saying thanks a lot. So that's 50%. Only 10% is living conditions.
Right.
So whether you're a billionaire and live in the biggest mansion on the beach in Mumbai, or you live in a shanty town in Calcutta, only 10% accounts for happiness. And the other 40% is voluntary action. And voluntary action is really making other people happy. The best way to be happy is to make other people happy. So we can modulate this formula, and this formula is based on studies in identical twins. They're not identically happy.
Adrian, what about your formula of happiness and how your journey on the happiness road began?
Yeah, I think my journey in happiness is early in my career, I placed a lot of focus on accomplishing and trying to succeed in my career and in life. And what I found was that that was great, but as I did that, it really didn't have as much to do with being happy as I thought it would. In fact, I think what the biggest value in a goal or going to achieve something is who you have to become in the process of achieving that goal, not the goal itself. So, you think about, if you watched the Super Bowl, yes, there was a great accomplishment, and a few minutes later it's over.
Yeah,
it's less than 2 weeks ago. But who did those players have to become in the process of achieving that goal? And I think that's where I started to recognize that happiness came from. And in my coaching with people, over and over again, I saw it. It was how they experienced themselves in life had much more to do with their happiness than their circumstances or conditions. One of my favorite books is a book by a gentleman by the name of Gay Hendricks, and he wrote a book called The Big Leap. And he talks about this set point, except he refers to it as an upper limit problem that people have. And he contends, and I agree with him, that people to some degree have difficulty actually being happy. It's not that happiness isn't there or available to them, but how happy will they let themselves be? And it's a common experience when I'm working with clients where a client will tell me how they noticed everything was going great, and that's the moment they start to worry. And what Gay Hendricks would say is it's at that moment that they've hit an upper limit in their willingness to be happy. So I actually think talking about changing that set point is very important, really letting yourself be happy.
Now, so that book by Gay Hendricks is a book that Adrian recommended to me, and I read it, and it's called The Big Leap.
Okay.
So you can be in that zone of comfort, and then you start to get uncomfortable. What if all this falls apart? But all of us have the ability to go to the next step, which is the zone of genius. And that's where there's more happiness, there's more
I
peace
must
of
read
mind.
that book, actually.
It's an excellent,
Yeah.
really,
It's a small paperback.
Excellent, okay. Now, Adrian, in your coaching experience, what is the one stumbling block you have seen among your clients when it comes to happiness? Would you think that this is the common?
I would say it really is allowing themselves to be happy. I think Mark Twain said it. What did Mark Twain say? He said, most people are about as happy as they've made up their mind to be. Right? So it's really at that moment of saying, I deserve to be happy. I'm allowed to be happy. How many of us were taught in different ways in different cultures and religions that we should feel guilty? That if we have more than someone else, that it's not okay to feel good. It's not okay to experience the joy of that. And
now,
so really letting ourselves be happy may be the biggest obstacle to being happy.
Now, sometimes we see, among our friends and families that there are some people who have everything. They have everything they want in their life.
Right.
Fame, money, house, everything, health. But still they are most unhappy people.
Right.
And I see it, quite often, very often I see that. So what is wrong and how they can change their life?
Again, I think it comes back to really actually choosing to be happy with what is. So whether you have $1 million, $10 million, $100 million, how do I choose to experience that? Okay? If I, when we were talking earlier about happiness, I'm not so sure in fact, I don't believe it's a continuum from unhappy to happy. First, there has to be a lack of unhappiness. So unhappiness, I believe, is more common with not having enough. Maslow's hierarchy, those that are familiar with that. Once those basic needs are met, okay, then it really becomes whatever in addition to that you get will not be what makes you happy. So if I don't have enough to eat or can't pay my rent or I'm cold, most likely most people, at least initially, will be unhappy. But once that's satisfied, then having 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 40 times won't do it. And yet we tend to do is look to the outside and instead of looking to the inside. When we look to the external to create happiness internally, it can never work. And yet we're addicted to trying to do that. And we have so many messages coming at us. The commercial with the car, the beautiful woman, the cologne. It doesn't matter what it is. We're constantly being bombarded with your happiness can come from the outside. And yet, if we really think about it, it never can.
So, the other way to, I love that, that's beautiful. The other way to think about it is that suppose there was a person sitting next to us and he was worth $1 billion. And he said, I'm not happy. There is a way for him or her to be happy.
How?
That is to find purpose in life. So, Sir Ken Robinson has written a wonderful book. It's called Finding Your Element, which is finding your purpose in life. He says the wellspring of sustained happiness is living with purpose. Montaigne, the French philosopher, said, the great and glorious masterpiece of man is to live with purpose. Mark Twain once said, the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. So we can all find our purpose in life. You have to reflect on it, and you have to say, what gives me the greatest joy that resonates for me, that doesn't even feel like work. When I'm doing it, I'm in my element. Or the other way it comes to you is you witness something horrific, and you say to yourself, I'm going to make a difference here. That requires amazing courage, fortitude, and grit. But I can tell you scores of stories about incidents like that where even young people have done it.
Now, this leads to another question for both of you, is if this is as simple as it is, as you were saying, it sounds like for happiness, this is all we need.
Right.
If you look at the world around us, not only in the United States, but all over the world,
Yeah.
there are scores and millions and hundreds of millions of people are in very miserable state.
Sure.
Why we are not able to communicate and teach them to be happy?
Well, I think,
and what can be done?
Yeah, what can be done, and I'm convinced of this, is that we have to teach the next generation, the future generations, the young people who will be the future leaders in all walks of life. And if we teach them happiness, if they are anchored, if they feel solid, there's going to be less conflict. And one way actually to promote that, and it's being done to some extent, is to teach them meditation.
Yeah. I was going to say, before Sanjiv answered, I would have said that I think what happens to most of us is we start out in life and it's almost like we get onto the hamster wheel. And one day leads into the next and we keep doing. And, we're not referred to as human doings, we're human beings.
Sure,
right?
Yeah, sure.
And I think that it's in that being that we start to understand ourselves and start to recognize if I keep chasing the next thing, then I can never be in the moment and be happy. I think whether it's meditation or some form of reflection or slowing down, right? I think that's so crucial to people being happy. Because when we slow down, we start to look inside, and that's where the only place that happiness can possibly be anyway.
There's a wonderful quote by Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor.
Actually, I've read his book.
Right?
Yes,
and he wrote a book called Man's
Yes.
Search for Meaning.
Yes.
He wrote it in 9 days. And he says, happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue as one's dedication to a cause bigger than oneself.
Sure. Now, if you look at the world around, and you see that so much money is being spent in removing poverty and doing this, that, all these things, billions and trillions of dollars are spent because this whole goal is to make people happy. Now, have you guys taken an initiative or thought about lobbying these governments? I say, you know what, if you really want to make happy people or you really want to change the world, here is our formula. Why don't you spend some money on this and let educate people? Have you ever thought about doing that?
We've thought about it, when we did our workshop and you came to it, many of the people in the evaluations or when they talked to us said, Sanjiv, Adrian, this was life-changing. How long have you been doing this workshop? And it was actually the first time we had done it. And they said, no, you're kidding. And then a common refrain was, you should now do this for big corporations like GE and Whole Foods and all of that. So we've thought about it, and I think the next step for us would be to do workshops for large corporations, hundreds, thousands of employees, learn from it. It's a constant process for us as well. And then we can go to nonprofits or to governments or to mayors, governors, and say, we think we have a decent formula here where people can be happy, then they're going to be creative, there's going to be less conflict, there's going to be less absenteeism. We're losing billions of dollars each year from people who are not showing up to work. Most of the studies now show that only 30% of the people feel that the leader or the CEO of the corporation has their best interest at heart. A lot of people don't like work. I get asked the question, Sanjiv, what's your favorite day in the week? And my answer is Friday evening and Monday morning, because I really look forward to working. I wish everyone felt like that.
Sure. Now, I didn't, Sanjiv mentioned about that workshop which I had attended last year. What were the 3 or 4 things you guys came up with? This is about happiness from that workshop.
Well, I think we talked, I really got it, and it came in the feedback from everyone. Really, people talked about their happiness coming from when they made a difference in someone else's life. So I think that's crucial. I think purpose is absolutely critical. And purpose is very different than a goal. We achieve goals or we set goals. Purpose is, what am I on the planet to do? Who am I? Who do I be? 2 people could do the same thing, and for one of them it's their purpose, and for the other person it's a job. It really depends on whether it's the right thing for you.
I think it's very interesting you're saying that, the difference between goal and purpose.
Yeah.
Because you can set a goal and you can may not achieve it, but purpose, if you set a purpose, you can...
Yeah, goal is much more external, right?
Sure.
A goal is, I'm going to do this or accomplish this, where a purpose is, who am I? And we aren't all the same. We are in some ways, that's what I was saying earlier. Some ways we're all very connected in the same, and in other ways we're all very unique. I'm not a poet, but it's really like singing a different song. Every one of us sings a different song. And what's your song? And that's what's my song. And I think knowing that and then living it, having the courage to live it, having the courage to be who you were meant to be. And I think when people do that, how can they not be happy, and how can they not make a difference in the world?
So the purpose is one. What are other things you came across?
So I think meditation. Going into what I would call going into the gap. Meditation is clearly one of the forms. Good friends, making a difference with other people, and living from a standpoint of accountability. Taking responsibility for your life. You probably remember that exercise that we did in the workshop on the difference between being accountable for your life or being a victim to your life. Happy people take accountability, take responsibility for their experience and what happens in their lives. So I would say things like being accountable, nurturing important friendships, meditating or dropping into the gap, and really finding your purpose.
There's one other thing that Adrian knows it.
Coffee?
No, there's one other thing, and that is the ability to forgive.
Yeah,
If you don't if you hold bitterness or rancor in your heart, you cannot be happy. If you hold a grudge, you cannot be happy. The analogy is like you're holding a hot coal with the intent to throw it at the person who has created the grudge, and you're simply burning your hand. Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison, after he's released, he's asked the question, do you harbor resentment against your white captors? And he gave the most elegant answer. He said, I have no resentment, I have no bitterness. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. It will only kill you.
Now, talking about friendship, you mentioned that good friends, right? So now the technology and the whole social media has totally changed the dynamics of friendship and people you know and all. So how the social media, or say Facebook, or all this bombardment of information is affecting happiness?
That's a very, very good question. I don't think I know the answer to that. I would love to look it up, but I worry a little bit about it, that people on social media have hundreds and thousands of friends, and they're losing some of the personal skills, losing the skills of looking at a friend in the eye, smiling at them. I don't think the camera does it. I don't think the social media. holding them, hugging them, saying, let's go celebrate together. Let's have that meaningful experience, whether it's going to a movie, a play, the theater, restaurant, coffee shop. You know,
Actually, somewhere I read a few months ago that those people who are on Facebook and social media, they are become very unhappy because they see the status by other people and say, oh, they are doing this and I'm not doing that. So I think, what is your take on the social media?
Yeah, you know, well, I will tell you, I don't do a lot of social media.
Okay. Are you on Facebook?
I have 13 friends on Facebook.
Okay. Okay. You are very lucky, I must tell you.
Right. Okay. And I don't really know. It's like Sanjiv said. It's a great question and it's one to ponder. But I do know that there have been one study I saw talked about people that are into social media a lot. There's a lower sense of self-esteem. I don't know if that's true or not true. And what you pointed out was people doing those comparisons. I think the difference between social media and the one-on-one interaction is typically the depth of the connection. How deep can the connection go on a computer monitor? But do I think there's anything wrong with it? No. If it expands people's network and connections, but I think to drop in even deeper once they make those connections. And what's the nature of what you're sharing on Facebook? Are you sharing, about the dessert you just ate, or are you sharing a beautiful story that you just heard? So I think, again, friendship is, we have superficial friendships and we have very connected friendships. The friendships that I think are a foundation of happiness are those very connected ones. So if you can create that on Facebook, all the better. It just may be more difficult to do.
I read a story about a young man in England, about 20 years of age, and he had a bunch of people as friends on Facebook. He was dying of cancer, and he posted, "This is my last post. I'm at peace, and you will not hear from me again." In the next week or month, more than £1 million came in to his charity. So social media can be very powerful if it's done for the right reasons.
Now, also wanted you to touch base on power and happiness. And I mean political power, economic power, social power, spiritual power. Have you thought about that how?
It is a great question. I think people who have physical prowess, financial prowess, may be happy, academic prowess. In order to have success in life, we have to have success in all those domains, right? Personal, physical, financial, spiritual, family, social. But I think the people who have the greatest prowess are those who have spiritual power. There's no question.
Adrian, what about you?
I was thinking about it as Sanjiv was talking, and I think the power, money, power, etc., are not in and of themselves the problem. It's the attachment to them that creates the unhappiness. So there are people, and because I think this is important, so many times we sort of make people with less financial resources more spiritual in some way, right? That's what you see as the person sitting there with the bowl and praying and so forth. And the person who has a lot of money, we may have a tendency to look at them and say, well, they're not as good because they're not suffering. I don't think we need to suffer to be happy. I don't think that we need to suffer, that to be spiritual we have to be poor. I think what happens is it's very tempting with money and power to be seduced by them. So it takes actually a more spiritual man at some level to be within the power and the money and maintain that connection to their happiness and their spirituality.
Now,
so it's not the money, it's how you spend the money, right? And there's actually a book just about this topic. And if you spend the money on meaningful experiences, or if you're a Bill Gates and Melinda Gates and Warren Buffett says to Bill and Melinda, you guys have figured it out. I don't even need to start my foundation. I'm giving you $36 billion, and you have to spend $3 billion a year, otherwise I take it back. Now, what he's done with his money is amazing, right? And he's going to be more happy with the way he spent that money than the way he was when he accumulated that money.
Sure. Now, also we are talking about on the individual level, this happiness. Now, if we take it to the societal level,
Right.
Are there certain societies or communities
Yeah.
which are more prone to happiness?
We're
Yeah.
hopefully going to go there this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the answer is that in Bhutan, about 30 years ago, the ruler said we are going to pay more attention to gross happiness product than gross domestic product.
Sure.
And if you see the people in Bhutan, they're very happy.
Sure.
They happen to be in the top 10 countries. The country that comes out ahead pretty much every time the surveys are done is Denmark. And part of the reason is, again, the social connectedness and the social fabric. So the health is taken care of, their maternity, paternity leave is taken care of, the education is taken care of, but more importantly, many of them work and live in communes. They live in communes. So there may be 10 families. So if one family has a 3-year-old daughter, she has virtually 10 or 15 cousins. There are many grandmothers. They're regaling them with stories. The mothers are taking turns to cook the food once in 10 days. That would make a lot of women happy.
Yeah.
And so they're very happy about that. America, by the way, is always between 20 and 25
And yet,
and
and
happiness.
yet the richest nation.
yet the
Sure.
richest
I mean, that's another, going to be next question is that competition is also have a very significant impact on happiness or unhappiness. And that's why when I was asking you the question about the societies and communities, the United States being such a competitive society, there is a competition
Right.
at every level. If this is what the DNA of the society is, how you can going to change that DNA to make it much more cooperative, happy society?
Again, I think it has to be finding purpose in life. And that is for the individual. It's also for a medical school. It's also for a business school, right? You could say that the greatest vision for a medical school is not only to be the best medical school in the world, but the best medical school for the world. If corporations engage with their employees and say, once a year, we're going to do something good for the world, and many corporations do that, and they are the happiest employees.
Adrian, let us talk about ego, love, and happiness.
Okay.
What is your take on that?
Yeah, so I guess what I would say is that ego is probably the enemy to both of the others. Okay, I think there's no quicker way to undermine happiness and love than to be caught up in the ego. And happy people are focused outwardly, not how it's about them, but how it's about somebody else. And think about that in relationship. If your focus is on give me from the ego place, what will happen to the relationship? If the focus is on truly being in love with the beloved, how can you not be happy? Right? And I think the same thing is true with happiness.
Sanjiv, for you, what are you always talk about gratitude. And I see in social media, you're always talking about gratitude. So what is the relationship between gratitude and happiness?
Yeah, so in a talk that I give on dharma, happiness, and living with purpose, I summarize the 4 attributes of the happiest people on this planet. And the first is that they all have lots of very deep and good friends. Your friends are your chosen family. The second is the ability to forgive. We've talked about that.
Sure.
The third is a wonderful quote from Albert Schweitzer, Nobel laureate, a very humble man. And he once said, I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I'm certain of, the ones amongst you who will be truly happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. So I've distilled it into 3 F's: friends, forgiveness, for others. But there's a 4th, and it begins with G, and that's gratitude.
Okay, excellent.
And if you express gratitude on a regular basis, we actually, in our workshop that you came to, gave everyone a gratitude journal and said once a week, ideally once a day, but even once a week on Sunday evening, write down what you're grateful for. And it's amazing what happens.
Yeah, I think this
There's
is so
a
powerful.
famous Catholic nun study that was done where they had about 170 nuns joining Notre Dame convent, and the Mother Superior said to them, write on a page about who you are and where you come from, what you're looking forward to. So they wrote down, And they were able to document that these were authentic handwritings of the people and followed them for 70 years. They were all 23. None of them were married. They were in the same convent. They ate the same food. None of them had any significant medical issues. And they then codified what they wrote into expressing low gratitude and expressing high gratitude. And on average, the nuns who expressed high gratitude lived 10 years longer.
Yeah, it's
In
incredible.
fact, one of them is, when I last looked this up, was alive at age 92. And the one who had expressed low gratitude, those are two prime examples, had passed away at age 57. But the average is 10 years.
Yeah.
So you can live longer just by
May I add something?
expressing
Sure, yeah.
gratitude.
You know, I think it's sometimes it's helpful to people to understand the why. And in this case, what they found with this process that we talk about is that every night stop at the end of the day and sit down and write a list of things that you're grateful for that happened that day. And in neuroscience, they talk about neurons that wire together, fire together, wire together. And given that as human beings we are question-answering machines, right? Little kids always asking you, why is the sky blue? Why this? Why that? If you ask yourself the question every day, what am I grateful for? It forces the mind to go looking for what you're grateful for. And the more the mind goes looking for what it's grateful for, the more accustomed it becomes to recognizing and being aware of what it's grateful for, and changes your state of being and state of mind. So this is such a powerful tool, and it absolutely works. It doesn't just work for some people, it works for everybody.
Now this leads to another thing that, it's basically habit, creating a habit, right?
That's correct.
So habit could be a good component of happiness too. Right?
Sure.
You can
Absolutely,
create a
as
habit.
long as it's the right habit, right?
Habit of create a right habit.
Expressing
yeah.
gratitude, habit of spending time with friends, habit of forgiving, habit of doing something good for others. There's a wonderful anonymous quote. It says, if you don't speak the language of gratitude, you will never be on speaking terms with happiness.
Sure, yeah, that's a very good one, yes. Well, we are really looking forward to listening to both of you at the Health Expo on April 19th
Very
in
excited.
Burlington Marriott. And Sanjiv, thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
coming. It was
Bindra.
really great talking
Thank you
to
so much for having
Thank
us.
you
Spend
very
time
much
with
for
you.
coming.
Thank you.
Yes.